We are live here on OC Rock Radio and Facebook Live today for a special podcast. I didn't have the recording going, so we'll have to edit that a little bit. But nonetheless, today's unfortunate podcast will be the funeral for the 2018-19 Lakers season. They did the impossible, and they lost to the Phoenix Suns, and they lost to the Clippers, and they blew a game against the Bucks. All things we said they could not do. So today is going to be the funeral for the Los Angeles Lakers. Along with that, though, Bryce Harper has signed a record contract, not like we've heard that before this offseason. 13 years, $330 million with the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll talk about that. But we're going to start the show with a little NFL news. As you guys might have known, the NFL Combine went on this past weekend. And since the Combine has happened, there's been a lot of talk about franchise tagging players. Certain players have been cut. And even an announcer unretired and is returning to the NFL. So I actually want to get to that really quick and get your opinion on Jason Witten returning to the NFL after 1 year in the Monday Night Football booth, where he kind of got mixed reviews as a color announcer. What are your thoughts on this? Let's get this out of the way. Jason Witten returning is going to be essentially probably the starting tight end of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course I'm excited about this, and this isn't surprising, especially for someone who follows the Cowboys. Now, listen, Jason Witten, ever since he went into the booth, was going to be compared to Tony Romo. Yes. And even though they never worked together, Tony Romo worked for ABC, and Jason Witten, was with ESPN with Monday Night Football, for how well Tony Romo was doing in the booth along with Jim Nantz, and the way that Romo was able to dissect plays before they even happened. He was like a magician out there. I mean, he was literally telling the viewers what was going to happen, and as a former quarterback, he has that knowledge of saying, okay, in this specific situation, this is what I think teams are going to do. So you kind of got that inside scoop. Well, unfortunately for Jason Witten, not to say that he had to do that, but he was just being compared in a sense to Tony Romo, and obviously the reviews were more negative than positive. And really, there were actually rumors midway through the season last year that the Cowboys were courting Jason Witten to come back mid-year, right? Yeah. So that was kind of how bad the tight ends were doing for the Cowboys midway through the year. I believe Jerry Jones went to Jason Witten and said, hey, man, we need you now. Like, whatever it's going to take to get you out of the booth now. Jason Witten said, no, I'm going to stick in the booth. But obviously, he kept himself in shape, and in the back of his head, he still had that itch to play. I think one of the main reasons why Jason Witten came back, along with his relationship with the Jones family and with the Cowboys organization, was the fact that he hasn't won a Super Bowl. Yeah. Now, obviously, I think he would want to win one with Tony Romo. That won't happen anymore. But he's coming into, I believe, his 16th year or 17th year. Basically, he is, the heart and soul of this Cowboys team, a leader on and off the field, and he's basically a coach on the field. So, plus the fact that he knows he can still play, he kept himself in shape, and at the end of the day, he's made enough money, right? I'm sure he will become a coach one day, or he can always go back into the booth. But I think that burning feeling of wanting to win a championship and leaving something on the table is what really brought him back. I mean, listen, the Cowboys got to the second round of the playoffs last year, right? So it's not like this team is full of a bunch of scrubs. They have players on both sides of the ball. They have a very, very good and young defense. Offensively, you have Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, and a very good offensive line still. I wouldn't say the best offensive line in the NFL, but a very formidable one. So I think all of those things combined is the reason why Jason Witten came back. Now, I am going to say, I'm not expecting him to come back and light it up and be a Travis Kelce or, I don't know, a Jimmy Graham and just be a guy that catches 100 balls and, 10 or 15 touchdowns. I think he's going to bring a little more consistency. I think he'll be able to help the younger tight ends in practice and kind of help teach them some techniques that can, develop those guys. But I think third down situations when Dak Prescott's in trouble, I think Jason Witten's a big body target and a guy that Prescott can kind of rely on, something he maybe didn't have for certain stretches of the year last year. So I'm all for this move, but, don't expect him to come in and just be the crazy fantasy scorer maybe that he once was in years past.
No, I don't think most people expect that either, because considering that even his last year in the league before he retired, he was he was a factor on the Cowboys offense, but it definitely was like when he would catch a ball, it'd be like, oh yeah, Witten's on the team. You're like, oh, that's Jason Witten, the occasional catch in the game, right? So, but I do think there's a possibility he might be the best tight end on that team. So
I don't think that's a possibility. I think that's a fact.
Yeah, and so him coming back kind of brings the gang back together in a year where the Cowboys, took the next step. I thought I didn't think they were going to be Super Bowl contenders this year. I didn't think they were going to be able to get past the Rams or the Saints, but they did take that next step, and by getting a guy like Witten. And getting Amari Cooper more gelled, and with the offensive line staying more healthy this year, this team, you never know, could possibly be a Super Bowl contender. I'm not going to say that because we'll see what happens in the offseason. You just never know who's going to come up, and there are a lot of surprise teams and stuff like that too. But the Cowboys are going to keep themselves competitive for sure. They're going to keep themselves at playoff level, and by getting a guy like Witten to come back, it's big for them. It's a position that they needed, and they added a need.
Yeah,
right.
It
simple
brings
as that.
It brings some consistency.
Yeah.
To that offense. There are times where obviously they're going to ride Zeke, and with the addition of Amari Cooper, that was big in the passing game. But 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, when maybe you can't necessarily run the ball with Zeke. Cole Beasley was supposed to be that guy, that kind of shifty slot receiver, Wes Welker type, where you put him in the slot and you give him an option route, and he's supposed to win every time. Well, whether Dak Prescott was looking the other way or whether they just weren't connecting, I'm not sure. But Cole Beasley wasn't that steady, consistency type of receiver that the Cowboys needed. So hopefully Witten can come in and help with that, because Cole Beasley is a free agent, and I guarantee he will get other offers from other teams. So there's no guarantee that he will be back with the Cowboys. So I think that's another reason why this Witten deal is of even more importance, because they could be losing a receiver in Cole Beasley. So yeah, just to kind of wrap it up, because I know we need to move on. I'm very excited about this move, and like I said, more than anything, just bring some consistency, some leadership, and I hope that kind of fuels the guys even more so to want to win a championship. Not only for themselves and the fact that the Cowboys haven't won since the mid-'90s, but to do it for a guy, a team leader that everyone loves, and kind of send him on his way with a championship.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you never know; could happen. Let's move on. Do we want to go NFL Combine right here? Let's do that, and then we'll get into the players that were cut and franchise tags and stuff like that. So the NFL Combine, a lot of news like usual coming out of this. As a Cardinals fan with the number 1 pick, there's been a lot of stuff talked about with Kyler Murray and who they're going to draft with the number 1 pick. Obviously, DK Metcalf puts on that absolute show. The shredded, ripped wide receiver from Ole Miss who somehow ran a 4.33 in his 40-yard dash. Jared, at least to you, what was the biggest thing here? What was your takeaway from the NFL Combine? Because there was a lot for me, obviously, with my team kind of being involved with a lot of stuff. But what was your takeaway from the Combine? Who impressed you, and what was fun to watch about the Combine?
First, there was speed, and more speed. This draft is filled with guys on all levels, not just receivers, not just cornerbacks, not just the small guys, but the big guys. Quentin Williams, DJ Metcalf, like we mentioned, guys that you wouldn't necessarily think of as elite speed players or quickness guys, and they were running all over the field. I mean, DJ Metcalf running a 4.33. He's 6'3", 228 pounds, and he looks like he could be either like a strong safety or a tight end.
Looks like a linebacker.
I mean, he looks like the dude is a freak, right? And so the thing with the Combine is obviously there's no shoulder pads. You're not going up against an opponent. You're really going up against air. And this is really more about agility drills. And some of the drills, to be honest with you, don't necessarily transition to the NFL specifically or with football specifically. So you kind of have to take things with a grain of salt. And I believe I said that on last week's podcast. But with that being said, there were some players who did help themselves, DJ Metcalf being one of them. Now, The hesitation that I do have with him is, yes, he ran a 4.33. We understand he's a freakish athlete, but running a 40 doesn't mean that you're a great receiver. There are other agils like the 3-cone drill, where the majority of the other drills, not actually receiving drills where he was running a slant or running a fade, but like the 3-cone drill and some of those other drills, he actually ran at a very slow pace, and he wasn't even in the top 30.
He was around. I saw some stat. He was around Brady range.
Yeah,
and that's not good.
Some of those drills actually equate more to a football game as opposed to just running a straight inline 40, because you're not going to ask him to run go routes the entire game, right? He's going to have to be able to run a slant, run some misdirection stuff. So it's a lot more than just the 40 time. But some other players who helped themselves, like I mentioned, Quinnen Williams, the defensive tackle from Alabama. I think he's definitely going to be a top 5 pick. I believe Todd McShay and Mel Kiper Jr. said that he has the potential to go number 1 to the Cardinals. So I want to get your thoughts about that one a little bit. A few other players, Noah Fant, the tight end from Iowa. I think he really helped himself. I think he's clearly the best tight end in the draft, the most complete tight end, one who can be an inline guy and can block, but can also be that Travis Kelce type where he can go and catch passes from all over the field. One more guy that I think really helped himself was Devin Bush, the inside linebacker from Michigan. He was a little undersized. He came in at 5'11", which is kind of the cutoff mark for a middle linebacker, but I believe he's like 240 pounds, somewhere around there. And if you watch tape of him with Michigan, he's not only the heart and soul of that team as far as like a fiery guy, he's literally all over the field. I think he averaged like 11 tackles per game, which obviously in college football, there's going to be a lot more tackles to be had as opposed to the NFL. But 11 tackles per game, I mean, the guy is all around the football. So a lot of defensive players other than DJ Metcalf, but I think there were definitely a handful of guys who were able to help themselves. Now, I do want to get your opinion on that Quinnen Williams pick, because there was some news coming out of Arizona that they could potentially be shopping their quarterback that they drafted over on number 1 overall last year, and potentially wanting to draft a quarterback number 1 overall this year. So before you get into that, talk to me a little bit about Quinnen Williams for a second, and then I want to get your thoughts about the quarterbacks.
Well, I mean, Quinnen Williams is he's a beast. I'm hearing, it's funny, with the number 1 pick, you can't pick 3 guys for the number 1 pick. You have to pick 1. So you look at Nick Bosa, you look at Quinnen Williams, you look at the possibility of drafting a quarterback, something like that. And it's all very juicy for a fan, right? But you only can pick 1. That's the one caveat with having the number 1 pick, is that you only get 1 of the guys. Quinnen Williams, I love Quinnen Williams. I think he'd fit great in our defense, where we run a 3-4 defense, so he could be right in the middle there with the 2 defensive ends. I don't think Robert Nkemdiche worked out too much for the Cardinals. He's been very injury prone, and I would absolutely not. I would not care if we moved on from him. Unfortunately, he didn't work out, but. I love Quinnen Williams, and I'd love if the Quinnen Williams rumors were a little more popular and famous than these Kyler Murray rumors that have been kind of...
Really?
Yeah, because here's the thing, and we're going to do the Lakers funeral later, and one of the reasons you could blame the Lakers for this season is the fact that the young guys were kind of thrown under the bus mid-season with this Anthony Davis trade. It's kind of what's happening with Josh Rosen now. Now, from what I've heard internally, the Cardinals have told Rosen he's their guy. But that's a report like all these other reports that come out and say the Cardinals are absolutely choosing Kyler Murray. So I don't really know what to believe, but there has to be something to it, right? It can't just be all BS. The Cardinals have to somewhat like Kyler Murray. Doesn't mean they're going to draft him, but they definitely have to have a fondness, which in turn is not good because you have a starting quarterback right now that's supposed to be the guy. Now, I know a different coaching staff drafted Josh Rosen, but you got to give the guy a chance. I think we talked about this on the last podcast. You put Josh Rosen in quite possibly the worst situation you could have put him in, and he didn't necessarily play that good. It's not fair. Give the guy a chance with an offensive coach, with Larry returning once again, with a Christian Kirk staying healthy, with David Johnson again, with more than likely an improved offensive line, and see what happens. Then go after Tua in the next draft. I mean, if you have to. If you have that bad of a year, again, to where you have to draft, to where you're in a top 5 pick, then you go after another quarterback. That's where I think you go after quarterback. But as far as this year goes, I don't think Kyler Murray is the end-all be-all, and I don't think they should be talking about him. So, with me, if they draft Kyler Murray, I hope we get like a first or second round pick for Josh Rosen, because at least then we'll get to draft some other players, maybe like a Quinnen Williams, something like that. But yeah, I really wish Quinnen Williams was the big guy they were talking about drafting number 1 and not Kyler Murray.
See, for as much as I do like Quinnen Williams, and I believe he should be a top 5 pick, even a top 3 pick, with the number 1 overall pick, the majority of the time that teams have that pick, it's because you're lacking at the quarterback position, right? And obviously, I agree with you. I think last year, Josh Rosen was not given a fair chance.
Yeah.
And obviously, whether it was injuries, whether he wasn't ready. Sorry. Nick and I, just so you know, are both coming off of being sick. Yeah. So you'll have to bear with us. You might hear a little bit of coughing throughout the show. But anyways, going back to Josh Rosen, I feel that he wasn't given a fair chance. With that being said, with a new regime and a new offensive system in place, I'm not so sure that this system fits what Josh Rosen does best. Mm-hmm. So, when wanting to be fair, if you really want to give Josh Rosen the best opportunity to, make himself look good and be a good quarterback, if I'm the Cardinals right now, if he doesn't necessarily fit this system, then I would look to trade him, because obviously guys need to be adaptable from not only a player's perspective, but from the coaches as well. But if you go into this saying, you know what, this guy just doesn't fit what we want to do and we need to go in a different direction to be successful, then I think it's okay to trade Josh Rosen, even though it's not the likely scenario and that's not what you saw coming when you drafted him originally. But Kyler Murray seems to fit what this offense wants to do. And so if you can get a first-round pick for him or a high second, I think you pull the trigger, and I think you roll with Kyler Murray, even though Quinnen Williams, might help you tremendously on the defensive side of the ball. In my opinion, quarterback trumps just about everything.
Well, and by the way, I'm not even saying I personally think that Nick Bosa is the guy the Cardinals should draft if they keep the number 1 pick. I've talked about this where I hope the Cardinals draft down and trade away the number 1 pick, keep hopefully a top 7, top 5 pick, and get something down the line, because the Cardinals have the number 1 pick and they have the 33rd pick, which is pretty much a first-round pick. They also have the 65th pick, which is pretty much a second-round pick. So if you can trade back and get even more assets, if they're not going to go with the quarterback thing.
See, that's where I agree with you. If you're not going to go with a quarterback, right? If you're going to pick another,
if they're going to keep Rosen,
right? Whether it's a receiver, a defensive lineman, Joey Bosa, Quinnen Williams, any one of those players, then yes, I agree. You find the best possible suitor who wants to come up to number 1. Whether it's the Giants, whether it's another quarterback needy team, whether it's a team that is just in love with Joey Bosa and wants to take him number 1 no matter what. You gut them for everything they have. First round pick this year, first round pick next year, second round pick this year, right? You get them for everything they have. You move back a couple spots, then you draft Quinnen Williams along with the extra picks. So I totally agree with that. But if this coaching staff and an organization is sold on Kyler Murray or sold on Dwayne Haskins, who knows, a quarterback, then I think they stick at number 1, pick him, and try to find a trade suitor for Josh Rosen. I think it's kind of that simple.
There's a couple things. I remember telling people that were Cardinals fans like myself and going on Reddit and stuff like that and saying, you know what, anything will be better than last year. Because last year's offense was boring to watch. The defense didn't play to its ability. And we barely won any games. We were practically unwatchable. So if that means drafting Kyler Murray and that means trading back and getting a bunch of assets, I'm okay with it. I'm just stating that I don't think it's fair to Josh Rosen and we should give him a chance, because I've seen what he's been able to do. I followed him in college. I followed him in high school as well. And I think this dude has the ability to be an NFL quarterback, and if you just give him the right scheme and offense and give him the right coach, he can be great like a lot of other great quarterbacks. And I think he can be the best quarterback from this most recent draft class. But if they go on, away from it and trade into the Giants or trade into the Raiders or whatever that is, and draft Kyler Murray, then what am I going to do? Not follow the team? And even no, you got to deal with it. I just would not do that because I think the extra assets that you could get from trading back is more valuable than trading for a quarterback that you hope plays well and is undersized. So that's just my take on that. And obviously, if it happens, it happens. But we will see. And we have till what? Late April.
Right. I believe they're like a little less than 50 days from the draft. So,
yeah, so
now that the combine's up, there will be pro days for every player throughout
and
the
Kyler
next
Murray did
month.
not throw at the combine. He will throw at his pro days. So we haven't even seen him throw and do all his 50 or not his 40-yard dash times, stuff like that. So
one last thing before we move on, because I know we need to get to some free agents. But the last thing with the combine. Montez Sweat, I think, is a guy that I forgot to mention who helped himself.
This guy's moved up.
The state of Mississippi was well represented at this combine, and for good reasons. Those guys not only ran fast, but they're just freak athletes. Montez Sweat is a defensive end out of Mississippi State who stands at 6'5", 260. He ran a 4.41 40. Let me repeat that. He's 6'5", 260. Right, he's basically like LeBron James, not even.
Yeah.
And he ran a 4.41, which is faster than like the majority of the receivers in this draft. The kid is an absolute
faster
stud.
than N'Keal Harry. Yeah.
I think he's another guy. If the Cardinals were able to trade back, say to number 4, number 5, something like that, you draft Montez Sweat, you pair him with Chandler Jones. Those are two of like the longest defensive ends in the NFL. And it would be a pretty good matchup to see those two get to the quarterback. I think you have to add him to the mix as well if trading back is an option for the Cardinals. Yeah. Just wanted to throw that
Absolutely. There's a lot of depth at positions the Cardinals need, too, which does help out, which is why waste a pick on the quarterback, right? A position that we actually don't need. So, that's just my take on it. But, all right, let's move to some free agents. Coming with the NFL Combine, like I mentioned earlier, the franchise tagging starts to happen because the season is, it's kind of starting to get underway now in some ways because you evaluate everybody at the draft. It's one of the few sports that has this combine type thing. I know the NBA has it too, but the NBA, number one pick is usually figured out by Zion Williamson. It doesn't matter what he does at the NBA Combine. He's still going to get drafted.
I think that one's wrapped up.
Exactly. So, with the NFL Combine, it's kind of the unofficial start to the NFL season, and that means, the free agents start and stuff like that. So, notable news, at least I came up with, and I want you to add anybody that I forget. Players that were cut, notably, Eric Weddle by the Ravens, Mark Barron by the Rams. I put Josh Bynes by the Cardinals because that could lead to possibly C.J. Mosley getting signed by the Cardinals as well.
Mosley.
And a former first-round pick, Kevin Johnson, by the Texans. People that were not franchise tagged. Of course, Le'Veon Bell. Landon Collins came as some of a surprise. Of course, Nick Foles, Trey Flowers, and Gostowski from the New England Patriots. And C.J. Mosley, like I just mentioned. And people that were franchise tagged, Frank Clark of the Seahawks. Jadeveon Clowney of the Texans. Dee Ford of the Chiefs, Robbie Gould, the kicker for the San Francisco 49ers, Grady Jarrett for the Falcons, and DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys. Was there anybody else that I forgot to mention or any other notable names that you wanted to mention?
I will say from the Kansas City Chiefs, I know you mentioned Dee Ford as a franchise tag. A guy that did get franchise tagged. Justin Houston, the other opposite outside linebacker. The Chiefs are supposedly rumored to be wanting to trading both Dee Ford and Justin Houston.
Oh, okay.
So even though Justin Houston's a little bit longer in the tooth, he's been with the team for a long time. Dee Ford's a first-round draft pick. He's going into his 4th year. I think the team is looking to go into a completely different direction after the defense was just abysmal last year, right?
Absolutely.
So they need to fix something. But yeah, other than that, I think you hit the majority of it on the nail. On the head, I'm sorry. DeMarcus Lawrence, obviously, for the Cowboys, 2nd year in a row that he has been franchise tagged. And just for people who don't understand, just because teams franchise tag a player doesn't mean that they're going to play on that franchise tag. Obviously, we've seen with Le'Veon Bell, players don't have to actually sign that franchise tag. They can sit out. But really what this does is this extends the amount of time that a team has to negotiate with a player. So teams and players now have until July 15th to come to terms on a long-term agreement. After July 15th, that player will have to either play into that franchise tag or sit out for the year. So For the Cowboys specifically, I know they want to get DeMarcus Lawrence signed to a long-term deal. They don't want him on that franchise tag for this year, but they just did that so they could extend the period of time that they have to work with him. So I know some of the other players, Davion Clowney, Grady Jarrett, Frank Clark, for example, or other guys that teams want to get long-term deals done
Frank
with.
Clark definitely wants an extension.
They don't necessarily want to keep them on that franchise tag. So just a little bit of, kind of news as far as that goes. But some big-time free agents that are on the market. Landon Collins, Eric Weddle, that's kind of a surprising one to me. Gostkowski, and Trey Flowers for the Patriots. So some big names out there, along with other guys who have already been free agents like Earl Thomas, Le'Veon Bell, obviously. So, obviously these guys are going to get paid and money's going to be spent, but the NFL outlook will look a lot different at the beginning of the year with some of these big name players. Do you have any idea of where some of these guys might fit in with a new team?
It's hard right now because I'd have to look at teams' rosters and just see who needs some stuff. I just want to say the Cardinals for everybody because I just
because they need so much help.
Well, they just need help. No, exactly. Actually, their DB core is actually better than what people think. So I don't think Weddle or Landon Collins would be possibilities for them. But I think it's more of what are these teams going to do? Like I mentioned with the Cardinals. Releasing their middle linebacker Josh Bynes, who kind of underperformed last year, that means that they're more than likely going to go after a free agent middle linebacker. I don't think they draft somebody. I think they need more needs than that. And C.J. Mosley has already been there's already been rumors and stuff like that with him, and he's already an established. So why not go give him some money? And the Cardinals really haven't had a solid middle linebacker for a while, ever since forgetting his first name, but Washington, who ended up never playing again. Darryl Washington, yeah, after some domestic violence issues. So really, since him, they have not had a solid middle linebacker since. So, for the Cardinals, I think locking up a solid player in C.J. Mosley, a possible Pro Bowler, would be good for them. As far as everybody else, we've talked about Le'Veon Bell. I've said Jets, Colts make sense for him. I've heard that Nick Foles and the Jaguars is probably going to work out.
I think that's a real match.
I would predict that, to be honest.
His former offensive coordinator with Philadelphia is now in Jacksonville, so I think that's a pretty set in stone that he's going to end up there.
Where do you think Landon Collins or Eric Weddle should go?
Those are interesting. Eric Weddle, now I don't know if this will happen because I think the Chargers will end up drafting more of a younger type guy in the draft, but I think there could be a reunion for Eric Weddle with the Chargers. Obviously, Eric Weddle made a name for himself when it was the San Diego Chargers, now the LA Chargers, but the Chargers did draft Derwin James last year, who was the kind of do-it-all safety. He was the Pro Bowl selection in his first year. He can, line up against tight ends and receivers and cover them, but he's more of a in-the-box guy. Eric Weddle's more that free safety, last line of defense. So, if he's looking to go out and win another championship, which at the end of his career, I think that's what his focus is, then if I'm the Chargers, I at least take a flyer on him. He's one of those other guys that's also a coach on the field. He gets everyone lined up. And even if you do draft another safety, he's a guy that can learn under Weddle and then take over for him in the following year. Landon Collins is another one of those guys that is an in-the-box type of safety. He's definitely not a cover guy. So I think it really depends on the type of scheme that he goes to, because if you're expecting Landon Collins to be a, cover receivers, cover slot receivers, cover tight ends, then I think that's the wrong system. And in today's NFL, where it's going to more of that pass-heavy type of offense, I don't know if Landon Collins will get the type of money that he actually deserves. I think he's going to have to take a little less. Now, he's still a great player, and if you use him right, more of like a down linebacker, a guy on first and second down that can, come up and play the run very well, I think he can be successful. But like I said, if you're expecting him to cover Antonio Brown or cover one of the elite receivers or tight ends in this league, then I think that you're highly mistaken. So I think he specifically has to go to the right system in order to be successful.
Yeah, dude's a 3-time Pro Bowler, so he's not a slouch. But that position on the field is kind of becoming less valued because the NFL is such a speedy game now.
Exactly.
Hard hitters
Exactly.
are hard to come by. You got DJ Swearinger, people like that, but hard hitters are hard to come by. Just other news I wanted to say before we got off. Donovan Smith, who's the left tackle for the Buccaneers, signed a 3-year deal, so Jameis Winston has his protection, and Bruce Arians gets an offensive lineman to stay there. That's one of the rare contracts we had. I believe Magnus Hunt signed back with the Colts as well. So
yes, Marcus Hunt.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Obviously, this is going to be flowing. Jared, educate me on this too. When is the free agent period start?
The NFL league year starts on March 13th.
Okay.
So we're very close to that.
Close.
And I believe
that's a week from today.
It is. And I believe 2 or 3 days before the actual league year is when teams and players can unofficially come to terms on a contract. Yeah. So you can't actually sign the contract.
Which is good for this podcast because we're going to miss so much if guys don't start signing early.
They can't actually sign a contract, but you can come to terms on a verbal agreement like that Sunday or Monday, and then when Wednesday comes around, you can actually have the contract drawn up and just sign it.
Exactly.
So, that's usually how it happens, but the actual league year starts on March 13th, and that's when the actual free agent period will begin. So we're coming up very, very soon. And just to kind of tie the free agency with the NFL Combine and the draft, basically we're about to learn a lot about teams in the next few weeks. Teams are trying to fill some of their holes with veteran players so that when they get to the draft, they can just draft best player available and not necessarily draft for need in those first early rounds. So you want to, fill some holes in free agency with guys without kind of going over the boat as far as spending too much money. And then when the draft comes, fill out the rest of your roster with, just great up and young coming players. So that's usually how teams try to play it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on. A lot of NFL news, but I'm guessing next week's podcast, we're going to be telling you guys about some big news and big free agent signings and big trades and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So that will be exciting. Stay tuned for that, but we're going to end the NFL as far as today goes, as far as segments goes, right here. Coming up on the other side of this break, Bryce Harper signed a big deal. Only reason we didn't start the show with this is because it's kind of late news. Didn't get a chance to talk about it. It broke Thursday night, so had a couple days to think about it and look over it. And so Bryce Harper signs that big 13-year deal with the Phillies. We'll discuss the deal itself, what it means for Harper, and what it means for the rest of the MLB. So this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio and on Facebook Live.
Here's the information on Severino. The MRI revealed rotator cuff inflammation, and Meredith Marakovich reporting this, will be shut down for 2 weeks. Because of the 2-week shutdown, Aaron Boone said it's highly unlikely Severino will start the season with the team.
I know exactly where he must have been arrested at, too. Literally where we were.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard that he got, that's his second.
Dude, paid for an Uber.
I know.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was in the Phillies clubhouse earlier today when it was open, and I can tell you that they are ecstatic with this move. They've already made some big free agent and trade moves over the winter to really improve this roster, but adding Bryce Harper now at such a late stage here just is icing on the cake. And as Gene Segura told me when I asked him, what was your reaction? He's going to be the new shortstop for the Phillies this year. His reaction was, World Series champions.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio and Facebook Live. I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And welcome back to the show, everyone. We're going to be jumping into a little baseball news. First, talking about Bryce Harper and that major record-setting contract with the Philadelphia Phillies. And then we've got some injury news from some players around the league, along with spring training wrapping up here in a few weeks. But let's jump right into Bryce Harper. Yep. Finally, of course, last Thursday, the day after the podcast, I've been chirping and harping for, it seems like, months now for Bryce Harper to finally sign. I know Nick, he had me not fooled, but he had me thinking that Harper was really going to sign here in LA or with some West Coast team.
I gotta do my work.
Seeing as he's from Nevada, but he chooses to go to Philadelphia back east. 13-year, $330 million contract. The interesting part about that, not necessarily the money numbers, no opt-out clause.
Yeah.
No trade clause, which basically means Bryce Harper will be in Philadelphia for the rest of the majority of his career.
That's what I call a no BS contract. I'm signing with you. Don't trade me. I'm not opting out. If something goes wrong, but I want to play for the Philadelphia Phillies.
And you know what? That's a little surprising to me, seeing as how all these other guys, whether it's a short-term or a long-term deal, Manny Machado opt out after 5 years, Nolan Arenado opt out after 3 years, right? And you would think Bryce Harper, of his caliber, would have at least wanted the option of opting out, right? I think in today's world, so many guys, when you're stars, you want to have some type of say in where you go. For Bryce Harper, he must feel really comfortable in Philadelphia, and I hope he likes the cold because he ain't going nowhere.
Yeah. No, he's sticking in the cold. He was with Washington, and now he goes to Philadelphia. Yeah, you know what? This came Thursday night, and when I saw this, it was shocking to me. 13 years. And the money wasn't as much as I thought it would be. The money, to be exact, is $25.4 million a year, which is nowhere close to any record with the last couple contracts we talked about happening. And it just looks like Harper kind of, he just wanted to sign somewhere. He wanted to make his money, and he kind of wanted to be done with it. And that's okay with me, I guess. I mean, because to me, it seems like obviously the Phillies are going to be a pretty solid team from here on out. You never know if they end up being like super contenders like the Dodgers have been or the Yankees have been or the Red Sox have been. But they are going to be a very solid team. They're going to be a playoff team. They might win a World Series or two, but you can't really predict right now because they have such a young team and the roster is kind of made up out of the blue right now. But for me, unfortunately, I'm going to say this. It just sounds like Harper kind of was in it for the money in the long run. And he kind of just picked the Phillies because they were the team that could give him a bunch of money and give him what he wanted. And if he would have gone to the Dodgers, or he would have signed with the Yankees, or he would have signed with the Braves, or someone like that has a legitimate chance at a World Series this year, that would have made it a little different. Maybe some short-term deals. But it just kind of seems like he's for the money. And yes, he's a great player. But he's never got out of the division series with the Nationals, who I would say had a better roster back then than the Phillies do right now, and probably still do as far as their rotation goes. And their lineup is still very, very solid. So for Harper, I think he just kind of waited out for the money. Maybe things didn't go exactly how he wanted. Maybe he did want $35 million and settled on, well, a long-term contract with no opt-outs maybe is better for $25 million because that's such a discount. And he just went for the money. It's somewhat disappointing. It seemed like the whole free agent saga with Bryce Harper kind of ended with not even a bang, but like a question mark, right? Like, oh, wow, 13 years, like till you're 40? And then no opt-outs, no trade. Like, it was a little weird to me. I don't know if you think the same thing, but when I first saw it and when I kind of started to really analyze it, I still haven't been able to figure out why, with the Phillies, he signed for that long.
Yeah, no, I've said this from the beginning. I think this was about the money. Clearly, it was all about the money. Now, obviously, Harper wants to win, right? I'm not sitting here and being naive about that. But he could have taken maybe a little less money and gone to another team that was more ready to win right now. The one thing I will say about the Phillies is the fact that they do have still a lot of money on the books, and they do have a young and upcoming team. I think 2-3 years down the road and for the future, this Phillies team can be set up for success, right? So Bryce Harper mentioned it in his press conference that wherever he went, he didn't want an opt-out clause. He wanted to dig his heels in and build some roots, and through the good, the bad, the ugly, all of that stuff, he wants to fully commit himself to this organization. I'm all for that. I'm glad that he said that. But he could also have said that with another organization like the Dodgers or the Yankees or some other team maybe for lesser money that was ready to win right now. So I think I think he was tied to getting that record-setting deal, especially waiting after Machado, waiting after Nolan Arenado signed his extension, and wanting to be that last guy to make sure that he was that all-time record breaker, for a certain part of his career. Now, I'm sure Mike Trout, or at some point in the next 4 or 5 years, there will be a baseball
Mike Trout's
player
breaking one of these records
that will break Bryce Harper's record. But I think for now, Bryce Harper wanted that in the history books as saying at one point, I was the highest paid player and I broke the record. So yes, it was about money. The interesting thing now is Bryce Harper has already been very forthcoming with saying that he will be courting Mike Trout, who is from back east, along with some other stars to come and play with him. So I think Bryce Harper has a plan in the back of his mind. We'll see if he can execute it. Like I said, the Phillies will have money to spend in the next few years. But it's scary to think about Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, two faces of baseball, on the same team. And if the Phillies were able to get Mike Trout, then yes, it's a great deal, and I think Bryce Harper made the right decision. That's obviously a year or so down the road, but just like I said, the most interesting thing to me is the no opt-out clause.
Yeah,
it's like, this is it, man.
Yeah.
Listen, if the Phillies decide to make bad moves, whether it's injuries or you can't get another superstar to come play with you, you're stuck, right? You can't say, in 3 or 4 years, you know what? Things didn't necessarily work out. I'm going to opt out and I'm going to leave. This is what it is, man. You buy your retirement home, you settle down in Philly, you raise your family, all that stuff. So it's just surprising to me because you don't see many players in today's age, no matter what the sport, that are willing to basically throw all their eggs into one basket and not at least leave themselves some room to leave if things go south.
Well, here's the thing. We do have actual evidence of this happening, though. Harper, we talk about it being a record-breaking deal because it was 13 years, $330 million. Giancarlo Stanton's contract is 13 years, $325 million. So Harper beats it by $5 million. And obviously, Stanton is not playing for the team he signed that 13-year deal with. Now, the Marlins are the most dysfunctional franchise in all of Major League Baseball history. And so them trading away their star and everybody else in their team is kind of an anomaly. I don't think the Phillies would do that. So it isn't guaranteed. Well, there is a no trade clause, and I think Stanton had no trade clause in his too. But if things did get awful like they did with the Marlins, I think Harper would accept a trade somewhere else. So it's that we're not saying that he's locked in, he has to be there, whatever. But more than likely, because of the promise of this team, compared to what that Marlins team was, he's more than likely staying here for 40 years. And this is even a whole different situation than if people want to bring up the Albert Pujols situation with the Angels, how he signed 10 years, hoping that the Angels would be World Series contenders. And they haven't been. A lot of those pitchers they had are gone now. Mike Trout has not been able to lead this team even to a playoff win. So, Pujols was different, though. He signed at a later, older age. So now Pujols is kind of now the Angels have to deal with Pujols. The Phillies are not going to be dealing with Bryce Harper. They want Bryce Harper. But if you're right, if they screwed up and people get injured and stuff happens, he has to think about the fact that if he's sitting there and they're 63 and 93 one year, whatever the record would end up being with the amount of games, he's going to be wondering, maybe that 3-year deal with the Dodgers would have been pretty good, right?
Well, too late now.
Yeah, exactly. Too late. See ya, Harper. I guess you're not going to play for us. But, it's whatever. There was a lot of jokes coming out, too, that were saying that when the Giants and Dodgers heard about 13 years, the GMs kind of snickered at each other, go 13 years. We were never going to do that, and that's true. I don't think most of the teams were looking at 13 years. The Phillies have what people have called stupid money, and they use that stupid money to make what some people would say a stupid deal for Bryce Harper. Because again, when Harper is 40 years old, they're going to be paying him $25 million a year. For Angels fans, we're paying a guy when he's 40 years old, around that same money too. His name's Albert Pujols. I just talked about him. That can work against you as well. Let's say in 13 years, now we're looking way into the future, but let's say in 13 years, the Phillies are in trouble. They still have $25 million in the books for Bryce Harper. And that's not even counting 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, when most players aren't in their prime if your name isn't Barry Bonds and you're taking steroids. So it's just those kind of deals where they're ridiculously long have never made sense to me. 8, right. 10 years. You know, the Machado deal made some sense because the Padres are trying to build up, and Machado would be 36, 37 when he's done with his deal. Harper's going to be 40. Most players that are 40 are not good, and especially with how violent his swing is, the chances of him being a viable player when he's about 36, 37 and older is slim to none. So that's another reason why this deal kind of was crazy to me, at least on the Phillies end of making it. Any last thoughts on this deal before we kind of get into some MLB spring training news?
I was just quickly kind of looking at the Phillies roster as of right now, and just looking, obviously Bryce Harper is easily going to slide into right field. I forgot that the Phillies have Andrew McCutchen there in left. They have Herrera in center. How do you feel from an on-field perspective? What does this do for the Phillies now? Does this catapult them in their division? Where do you see this team from realistic expectations going into this season? Well,
here's the thing. Me and my dad actually went over this 2 nights ago. We like to, when kind of the big free agents finally sign, we like to predict the divisions and do all that stuff, kind of like what we're going to do on our podcast, but we just do it real quick. And my dad thought the Phillies would now win the division because of this. I personally think the Phillies are now a playoff contender. I didn't think they were a playoff contender before this deal was made. I thought it would be close, but in a division where the Atlanta Braves won it last year and they improved, the New York Mets improved, and the Nationals kind of stayed very similar and added one of the best pitchers in the game, I thought it was going to be very hard for them without a star, without a third outfielder, to make the playoffs. Now I believe they have a legitimate chance to make the playoffs, and they have a legitimate not gripe, but a legitimate chance at that wild card spot. I don't think they'll win the division because I think the East is too hard, but they definitely put themselves as playoff contenders this year, and for a chance in the next coming years to be even better than that, depending on if they spend their money smart and stuff like that. So I do think they turn themselves into a from a non-playoff team to a playoff team with this deal. Not necessarily a World Series contender, because you have the Yankees, you have the Red Sox, you have Houston, who got better. The Dodgers are always there, Milwaukee, all these teams. I think those teams are better than them, and I'm not going to come out and say that the Phillies are going to win the World Series because they signed Bryce Harper. Because like I mentioned, Harper's never even got past the NLDS, right. and because I follow a lot of guys from the Dodgers organization on Twitter, they were talking about how when the Dodgers had that great 5-game series against the Nationals a couple of years ago, they don't remember. They kind of forgot Bryce Harper was on the team because of how much of a non-factor he was in that series. So, that's another thing to think about when you're looking at these guys. Manny Machado last year, we talked about this. When he signed a big deal with the Padres, it's like, did you see what he did with the Dodgers last year? A lot of people probably forgot he even played for the Dodgers last year. And now Bryce Harper, who hasn't done anything in the playoffs, gets signed to a 13-year. It's like, you realize that guy didn't do anything, right? It just dumbfounds me sometimes that people put all their eggs in a basket of a guy that has proven not to be a playoff player. And Bryce Harper has made the playoffs multiple times. So it's, we'll see.
Yeah. Let's move on. There's some injury news in the baseball front, and the biggest one, I believe, is the Kansas City Royals
it's
catcher,
so unfortunate.
Salvador Perez, 6-time All-Star, one of the best catchers in the league, is going to be out for the year after injuring his shoulder last week. He got a second opinion, and he will now have Tommy John surgery and will miss all of this year. Hopefully we'll be back for the start of next year. Usually it's about a year.
Well, and the one difference with him, though, is with a catcher, you really do need your arm. Right. So you can't go out. I mean, my brother's been dealing with a shoulder injury from his football season and still can't play the outfield right now. And the injury happened in November or something like that, and that's just a shoulder, like a crack. So Tommy John surgery, for a catcher that needs to be able to throw as hard as they can down to second base, I can't guarantee he'll be back for the 2020 season, but yeah, he's definitely out for this year. And what sucks about this, not only is this guy a great player, 6-time All-Star, is a great guy, and he literally is the only good hitter on the Royals. The Royals are going to be god-awful now that they don't have this guy. I mean, he was their team leader, he was their backbone, and they lose him. It's not good at all for the Royals, and it's unfortunate that such a great guy goes down. And you know what's funny? I was thinking about this the other day, too. You have we've been waiting for all these free agents. There's always one bad injury in spring training. It happens. It happens a lot more in like football, and it does happen in the NBA sometimes as well. But you're just waiting for hopefully this is the first spring training where nobody gets hurt, and then boom, Salvador Perez, Tommy John surgery. I don't want to say luckily it wasn't a great team, a great player on a great team, but at least the silver lining in this is that the Royals didn't have a chance in the playoffs this year anyway, so losing Salvador Perez is not gonna hurt MLB ratings or anything like. Yeah, it's not going to affect the MLB in a whole. But you know, Salvi Perez, great guy, and there's not a lot of great catchers in the MLB, so to lose one for a season is not good either. Yeah, well, right. So another silver lining, another player in the AL will get an All-Star spot because Salvador Perez probably would have took that up, and now you have a young guy. And maybe somebody else will get a roster.
Someone will take an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. So, another injury front for the Yankees, and our good friend Alex Silva will like to hear this one.
This is a sketchy one.
Yeah. Severino with right shoulder inflammation. They say he's going to be shut down for a few weeks or so. GM Brian Cashman saying that obviously they want him back as soon as possible, but you don't want to bring him back too soon and then, have him miss multiple months. So it's the beginning of the year. You'd rather have him heal up and get healthy, miss a few games at the beginning of the year, and have him healthy for the rest of the season, obviously. So this one is big, obviously, because not only are the Yankees contenders, Severino is one of their best players. So where do you see this for Severino and the Yankees? Is this a minor deal, seeing as it's only a couple weeks of an injury? And if healed properly, he can come back. Where do you see this, or where do you see the Yankees going with this injury right now?
No, to be honest, this injury scares me.
Really?
This because I just read something, and being a guy that pitched in high school and didn't throw a certain pitch because I thought it would hurt my shoulder, to hear that when he threw a slider and he felt the inflammation, that's not good. And sliders have been one of the reasons that a lot of doctors say that there's a lot more Tommy John surgeries. There is a lot more elbow and shoulder injuries because sliders are kind of unnatural pitches. For him to get hurt on the slider means that there could be something deeper with this. And yeah, we say it's a couple weeks, but what if he feels it again? And to be honest, I'm ready to put all my eggs in the basket on the Yankees this season. I think they have well enough hitting, they have a great bullpen, and they have enough starting pitching to win the division and be the best team in baseball. But if you lose your number one starter, that ruins everything. And right now, Luis Severino is their number one starter and their young future. And this is absolutely something that could derail the Yankees' dream World Series season if this is in fact true.
Oh boy.
So I really hope this is nothing. Like, I hope Clayton Kershaw's shoulder thing is nothing. But I'm just saying, a slider causing this injury in a sim game is not something a former pitcher wants to hear at all, especially from a young stud like this. And a guy in Severino, we talk about playoff success, that hasn't had a lot of playoff success and has disappointed so far as a number one guy. And it's been one of the reasons the Yankees haven't won the World Series yet. So, at least since their 2009 World Series. So, yeah, it's a little scary. I don't like this injury, and hopefully, for prediction's sake, that Severino's okay. Any other injury news you want to talk about, or should we move?
I believe those are the, really the two main injuries for teams with Perez and with Severino. So other than that, there are a couple other minor injuries. Obviously, as spring training goes along, you're going to have injuries throughout, but those would be the two main players, two star players, that are going to affect their team.
And Clayton Kershaw did start throwing the other day too. For anybody that wanted to update it on
good
that
sign
as
for
well.
the Dodgers, but not sure if he'll be ready for opening day.
No, he's still penciled in as the opening day starter, but yes,
I think that one's
they'll
still...
take him very slowly because,
Right.
but the thing with the Dodgers is they have Walker Buehler, Julio Urias has looked great, and they have other pieces, so in a little better shape than the Yankees as far as their starting pitching. Whereas if Kershaw's out even for a month, the Dodgers still will be fine. I think out for longer, that's a little sketchy as far as battling the Colorado Rockies in the division, but we'll see about that. And I did want to mention dumb guy of the week, Cameron Maben. Got a DUI in Scottsdale. I don't know why guys that make millions of dollars don't just pay for Ubers.
Have a car service, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I do, and I don't have a lot of money usually, and I just don't understand why guys do this. I don't get what the circumstances is, because I was in Scottsdale on Thursday, okay? I was at these same bars these guys go to, and I took Ubers. So why can't Cameron Maben? So, dumb guy of the week, Cameron Maben.
Yeah. Signed a minor league deal with the Giants.
Yeah.
I'm sure that deal will either be terminated or, if I'm the Giants, you signed him to a minor league deal, so it's not like he's already, on the roster and he's going to be a major contribution to your team. So, he's a 12-year veteran. He's kind of towards the end of his year. He's been a utility guy, and he's been on multiple teams. It's not like he's stuck with a main team. So, yeah, you're right. Dumb guy of the week award goes to Cameron Maben.
Yeah, hopefully we don't do this again next week. But, that's not a good one, Cameron. Come on. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to Do You Care on the other side of this quick break. We'll take a break from the kind of sports we've been talking about and dive into the stuff we haven't been talking about. Speaking of like March Madness coming up, some big news. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio and on Facebook Live. We will be back with Do You Care?
Team search for a winner here. Oh, it's a lovely jump by Diamante! Adama Diamante! What a moment for him! And they are going crazy amongst the 32-52. They've won it surely at the death.
What?
Because of track conditions, I'm pretty sure.
21st?
Yeah, 21 horses have died in 2 months. Dude, that is like... And I think it's 3 in the last 3 days, too, because I keep seeing it. Horse dies, euthanized on track.
But the story here tonight, one of the most remarkable runs in college sports, is over. The Kansas Jayhawks have been eliminated from the Big 12 regular season title. After 14 in a row, it is done.
The Celtic fans who are still here are enjoying their moment. 33-point win. Steve Kerr and Brad Stevens, two of the best in the business.
We are back here on OC Rock Radio as well as Facebook Live. Jared, do you know what time it is right now?
What time is it, Nick?
It's time for the first March edition of the year 2019 of Do You Care?
A little scratchy.
That was dead, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't think it would happen. My voice is feeling a lot better.
Okay.
If you would have heard me 2 days ago, you would have not wanted me to be
that
on
one
the
kind of
podcast.
hurt me, so.
100%. Yeah.
All right.
I apologize for all the kids that were listening during that unfortunate screech of the voice.
It's okay.
But nonetheless, it is time for Do You Care? And we have some great and very interesting questions today about some... We got soccer news, we got horse racing news, we have Warriors talk, we got everything on this Do You Care? So might as well start it before we run out of time on the podcast. So, Jared, you get the first question today. Do you care that the Golden State Warriors lost by 33 at home to the dysfunctional Boston Celtics?
Woo! No, I don't care. But I will say, good for Boston for finally getting their act together and coming through with a big-time win. It's not like they beat a scrub team like the Lakers or something like that. They beat a legit opponent.
Just wait for the next segment.
Yeah. They beat a legit opponent in the Warriors at Golden State. The Warriors literally came out flat. I believe Boston went on like a 13-0 run to open the game, and from there the Warriors were never able to get things together. I believe Marcus Smart said that there was a long flight from Boston all the way, traveling all the way to Golden State, and they said on the plane players were able to kind of talk to each other and kind of hash some things out. So we'll see if this leads to more wins. Boston will obviously make the playoffs, but up until last night, it was, things were kind of coming off the rails a little bit. So good win for Boston, but listen, for the Warriors, they're fine. You're going to have those types of games, and, hopefully this is an eye-opener. I feel bad for whoever the Warriors play next because I guarantee you they will not get their butts whooped like they did last night.
Hopefully it's not the Lakers.
Nick, do you care that Kansas, their 14-year Big 12 title streak, is coming to an end as they lost to Oklahoma last night?
No, I don't care, but this is crazy that this streak is finally ending. It almost seemed like it was going to happen every single year. It is not, and this year, guaranteed after that Oklahoma loss, Kansas will not win the Big 12. It's either going to be Kansas State or Texas Tech, who have the same record right now. So we don't know who's going to win the Big 12, which is interesting because this week matters for Big 12 basketball. So I might actually check out those two teams' games this week. But nonetheless, Kansas will not win it. And I heard, here's an interesting stat too. I was looking at Joe Lunardi's bracketology because you can already kind of look at how the bracket's going to shape up. As of right now, Kansas is going to be projected as a 3 seed, and they would play our local UCI in the first round.
Oh,
That
wow.
is what the projection would be, is if UCI wins the Big West, which they have dominated this year.
Let's go Anteaters.
Exactly, and if they don't win, that would be, one of the most disappointing, losses that college could have as far as basketball goes. But that could be very interesting to watch our local UC Irvine play big Kansas in a tournament game. So
Okay.
We'll see what happens with there. Yeah, but Kansas State, Texas Tech, they have the same record. They're battling for the conference title. But yeah, this big historic streak is coming to an end for sure this weekend. Jared, speaking of sticking with college basketball, do you care that overall the regular season for college basketball ends this weekend?
I do care. And listen, I'm just looking at the top 25 right now, and it is dominated, at least in the top 5, by the ACC. Gonzaga sits at number 1, but number 2, number 3, number 4, Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke, right, all sit there. Now, obviously, Duke without Zion Williams, they've been struggling. They squeaked out a win, and I mean squeaked out a win against Wake Forest last night. Wake Forest had the ball and they had a last-second shot. The ball literally went all the way around the rim and came back out.
Well, it was an inbounding violation.
Yeah,
that gave them the ball
listen,
back.
Duke, I understand they don't have Zion, but they still have good players, but it doesn't seem like they're playing with that same type of energy, so hopefully Zion can come back for the ACC tournament like head coach Krzyzewski was saying, because they need an influx of energy right now. They're not playing as well.
I also, to be honest, I don't think they need him for I think they should literally wait till the last possible minute to bring him back.
I agree.
Because you're going to win your first
Here's
round
the thing,
matchup
though. I
in the
think you
tournament.
want to go into the tournament with some momentum. So if Zion's at like 90% or around there, I think you bring him back just for the pure fact of having an energy. If he comes out and blocks someone's shot, that's just going to elevate that team and kind of spark them. They need a spark right now.
Yeah,
so
I'm just saying that they're going to be a high seed anyways, whether they win the ACC or not. So why not just wait it out? And maybe even that first game of the tournament, you don't even need him necessarily because you have a good enough team, and you just bring him back at the best possible moment. But then there's also the talk that he could be rusty, and you don't want him rusty for the tournament as well.
You want him ready to go. So, but yes, no, I do care because March Madness is starting now. After the end of the season on Saturday, every conference will go into their conference tournament. So March Madness is starting at the end of the month. So there will still be some bragging rights as far as the tournament games go for college basketball. Nick, do you care that the MLS season kicked off this past Saturday?
I do care. I'm a big LA Galaxy. Well, I'm a big fair weather LA Galaxy fan. I pay attention as much as I can, and I'm interested to see how the team does this year because they disappointed last year not making the playoffs. I was actually at the game where they didn't make the playoffs, even though they obviously have high-profile Zlatan Ibrahimovic on the team. Interesting this year, though, they brought up a 16-year-old that is a local kid here from Los Angeles. So you have the dynamic of a 16-year-old playing with the almost 40-year-old Zlatan.
Wow.
And he did assist Zlatan on a
That's
goal
awesome.
in the first game. So they get a win, and the LAFC literally scored on their last possession in some crazy goal sequence against Sporting KC. So both teams off to a hot start here in LA. I want to keep that LA rivalry going. And 3 points for both teams to start the season. So good for them. And I'll be interested to be watching the rest of the season. Jared, do you care that Antonio Brown is expected to be traded by this Friday?
I do care. Obviously, Antonio Brown, one of the most notable receivers in the game, still a top 3 receiver. Obviously, everyone knows, unless you've been sitting under a rock, about all the drama between Antonio Brown and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And finally, within the last month or so, the Steelers have come to an agreement that they will look to trade him. Now, there's no guarantee that they will. They obviously still could keep him and, keep him upset, and who knows what will happen with that. But things are pointing to Antonio Brown being traded, seeing as there are multiple other suitors around the league, as the Cardinals, as the Oakland Raiders. I've heard the Redskins. I've heard the 49ers. So there are definitely suitors in teams that would be willing to bring on Antonio Brown's services. The Denver Broncos, even though Antonio Brown brings some off-the-field baggage, but his talent seems to supersede all of that. And hopefully by Friday and by next week's podcast, we will have some breaking news on where Antonio Brown will be playing football for the next year.
Yes, do it on Tuesday.
That's right. Last question for you, Nick. Do you care that Santa Anita has suspended their races after 21 racing horses have died?
Yes. I do care about this. This is so unfortunate, and if you're not familiar with horse racing, horses do die on the track because unfortunately horses can't break their legs as bad as they do. The way their legs are structured, they cannot be fixed. So unfortunately, when a horse breaks his leg during a race, that is normally his last day on this earth. So a horse dying on the track is not as crazy as as it sounds. 21 horses dying in 2 months, that's as crazy as it sounds. If you're living in Southern California now, you've realized that it has been raining at a very abnormal rate here in Southern California. I believe it's raining right now as we're doing our podcast. And this is messed up track conditions for a course that is not used to this kind of weather. And so Santa Anita, they still race even if the track is muddy and stuff like that. And unfortunately, that's causing a lot of injuries to these horses, and they're going to look into it. I think in some ways this is kind of them saving their backs as well because you can't continue. And this is it. At least I believe was 3 horses in a row. Like yesterday, the day before, and the day before that, it was just horse.
Wow.
Like it was. I was just following it like kind of low key on my Twitter, and it's like another horse that like it's like every day. I thought it was the same horse. No, it's a different horse. So this so it's 21 horses in 2 months. The track is closing down, not for good, but it's definitely shutting down to fix the track, and I think that's good because obviously you can't be having a non-quality track. If this was football, they'd do the same thing. They'd fix the turf. If this was baseball, they'd do the same thing. Ice with the hockey and the court and basketball. So unfortunately, it's at the demise of some horses so far, but these fixes more than likely will fix this issue and improve it so this kind of stuff does not happen in the future. All right, that's the last question for Do You Care? Coming up next, you do not want to miss this, the Lakers 2018-19 season funeral. We're going to dive into everything Los Angeles Lakers. This whole segment is going to be about 30 minutes dedicated to figuring out what the hell happened from June 1st to right now, to where the Lakers are not going to make the playoffs more than likely this season, and we're giving them a funeral in the season. So we will be right back here on OC Rock Radio. We will be right back on Facebook Live. This is the Cover 2 podcast.
Come into Los Angeles and take care of business and beat the Lakers.
Well, the Lakers were pretty much there for 46 minutes or so, 47 minutes almost. But then that one dry stretch where the decisions, and it cost them in a big way.
Score 118 to 109. Phoenix. And this game is over, and that should count. Josh Hart makes it. It'll be 113 to 105 final.
Like UCI, like they won the Big West regular season crown like 3 games ago. It is crazy. They
really?
Yeah. Oh, they're like, I think they only have like 5 losses on the whole season.
Damn.
So if they don't win the Big West, like it's probably the biggest disappointment for any college basketball team.
Are the Lakers done?
They're done. It's over. It's a wrap. It was pretty ugly looking at them last night.
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio and Facebook Live for our final segment of the show. Once again, I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And we are, like Nick mentioned, going into the unofficial Lakers funeral.
Yeah.
As the Lakers, since the All-Star break, are 2-7, I believe. Pretty pathetic. They've beaten the Houston Rockets, which is a total surprise, and then they beat the New Orleans Pelicans with Anthony Davis only playing about 20 minutes. If you played the full game, they probably would have lost.
Yeah,
and other than that, the Lakers have just been dreadful. Now, they have had, they've been decimated with injuries, so I'm not going to sit here and say they've had the full complement of their team, but when you still have LeBron James and you still put up the pathetic performances that you have, then on this show you are going to get a Lakers funeral when you are basically out of the playoffs. Now, they're not mathematically eliminated, but the way that they're playing and what it would take for this team to get into the playoffs, along with some of the other top teams having to lose the rest of their schedule, it just doesn't seem likely. So with that being said, we're going to get into this Lakers funeral and talk about
the proceedings. Yes.
Yeah, basically talk about. Now, we're not all wearing black. We should.
No, I thought about doing that, but for the rest of the podcast, it wasn't a funeral, so I did half and half. I wore the black sweats in honor of the Lakers fans here that had to deal with losses to the likes of Atlanta, to the Memphis Grizzlies, and of course, the end-all, be-all, the loss this weekend to the Phoenix Suns.
Who
were the worst team in the league.
Team in the league. They have 13 or 14 wins.
And what was the score of that game?
I don't even want to know.
Yeah. They lost by 9 to them, and LeBron threw the ball off the back of the backboard. So, yeah.
Nice.
And the only reason they even had a chance against the Clippers is because Rondo made like 5 threes or something like that.
Rondo actually showed up, played well.
Yeah, somebody showed up. Yeah, this is abysmal. I'm trying so hard not to just light them up because I have so much written down here on this. I'll start with this. This, as a Laker fan, and I've been following them since 2000, 2001. Those are the first Laker games I can kind of remember watching when they were in the finals and stuff like that. I went to playoff games in 2003 when Shaq and Kobe were there. From when I've started following them, this is the most disappointing season I've ever watched them in. From early June when LeBron James signed, I remember where I was, and I was like, wow, they're title contenders now. Yeah, not so much anymore. No, the Lakers not title contenders, not even playoff contenders. They're lottery contenders this year. They're top 10 pick contenders. They have a better chance literally this year to getting another top 3 lottery pick than they do making the playoffs. And we talked about, just to give you guys just to delete all hope real quick, in order for the Lakers to make the playoffs, my brother and I formulated this last night. Realistically, they can finish 42-40 this year. Looking at games and realistically giving them wins against teams that they could beat.
So they have to go 12-6.
12-6, correct. Yeah, they had to go 12-6. The Spurs, who are the 8th seed, would have to go 6-11 to tie them. The Clippers would have to go 5-11 to tie them, and the Utah Jazz would have to go 6-13.
So teams would have to collapse.
Yeah,
the Lakers.
And if you look at the Utah record, there's no way that's going to happen because I think they have the easiest schedule. They play the Atlanta Hawks. They play all these teams the Lakers couldn't beat. The Clippers, we figured out, could not. There's no way they're going to go 5-11. They're just not going to collapse. And the Spurs have the best chance, but still to them, we had to give them some losses that they're probably not going to lose. So the Lakers are done. And so if you think the Lakers have a chance, they don't. So that's why we're doing the funeral. We're just here right now as more of a way to kind of finish talking about them this season. We're probably not going to talk about them much.
No.
Barring Luke Walton getting fired or something like that.
They don't deserve to be talking
exactly.
about.
As far as this season goes, it's over. The Cover 2 podcast is not talking about them. Now we're going to figure out, we're going to do our postseason talk. What the hell happened and how they're 30-34 right now, tied with the Minnesota Timberwolves in the standings, 1 game ahead of the Dallas Mavericks, and 1 game above their record from last year at this exact same moment. So, Jared, I give you the floor. What do you want to talk about first with this Lakers team?
Yeah, well, listen, before I just go in and completely bash them, like I mentioned in the opening, you have to sit here and say, okay, this team has not been fully healthy throughout the year. Obviously, they've had multiple huge injuries. Right now, this team is decimated. They're really playing with like 7, maybe 8 guys in the lineup. Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, Lance Stevenson, Tyson Chandler are all out right now. Right, Kyle Kuzma got injured in the game a few nights ago. He'll be out for a week. Lonzo Ball has been out for about 2 months. Brandon Ingram, I'm not exactly sure what he's dealing with, but for some reason
he woke up and his shoulder hurt. That's what they said on the Lakers broadcast.
Really?
Yeah.
So like,
or the
tightness,
Clippers
soreness.
broadcast. That's what they said.
Soreness, basically.
Yeah.
Which is basically saying he doesn't want to get out there and play
of course.
because he knows the team is garbage.
Yeah. Well, but you know, this is the yearly routine. Is eventually the Lakers got to start to get that top 5 pick. So players got to stay. They're still in that mentality, I guess, even though they have freaking LeBron James on their team.
Right. Well, and listen, LeBron James has also been injured as well with that hamstring.
Yeah, that's big.
And that was obviously the biggest one. Before LeBron James's injury, the Lakers were sitting in 4th place in the West. Obviously, that's good enough to not only get you in the playoffs. If the season would have ended right then, the Lakers would have had home court advantage, at least in the first round of the playoffs. So, obviously, that was huge. And I think the biggest thing out of all of those injuries is that ever since LeBron James has come back, whether he's come back too soon, I do not know that. What we do know, and what is very clear, is that LeBron has not been the same guy since he's come back. He's looked sluggish. He's looked just tired. He hasn't played any defense. He hasn't had that same explosiveness. Now, he probably isn't 100%, and he probably came back quicker than expected, knowing that he needed to, bring some energy and be that leader on the court. Well, guess what? He hasn't been able to do it. He hasn't been able to carry a team like he has in years past and do what he's needed to do, in order to... Listen, LeBron James came to Lakers to win the championship, obviously, among other things. We understand the off-the-court stuff and about how he wants to build his brand. But as far as on the court, he did that to be the leader of this team. The problem is he has such a young group of guys and not enough talented veterans, enough of a good mix to go along with this youth to really gel and come together and win. I think the biggest example of that is right before the trade deadline, when the Lakers were obviously looking to get Anthony Davis, and the rumors leaked that all these players' names, like Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma and Josh Hart, all these guys' names got leaked. And listen, it doesn't matter how many years you've been in the league, and especially for a young player, when you hear your name out there like that, it's going to affect you, right? They're still human beings at the end of the day. As much as we put these guys on pedestals and think that they're just the greatest thing since sliced bread, it's going to affect your play. And I believe they were playing in Indianapolis against Indiana. I'm sorry, when they were playing against the Pacers without Victor Oladipo, and they got smacked. And it was very clear that this whole trade deadline process was taking a toll on this team. But even since that has passed, this Lakers team just doesn't have any fight. They don't look like a team that's built for the playoffs. And like you mentioned, after losing to the lowly Phoenix Suns last week, that was basically the nail in the coffin that said, this team is not only not going to make the playoffs, they don't deserve to make the playoffs. And like I mentioned, I believe I mentioned this on last podcast, if the Lakers don't make the playoffs, and LeBron James specifically, LeBron James will miss the playoffs for the first time since his rookie year, to put all of that into perspective.
Yeah, it's just crazy that they're not. I get there was injuries. LeBron was out for a long time. When you look at the record without LeBron, it wasn't good. I don't have it specifically. Lonzo Ball, I believe the record is 5-14 without Lonzo Ball.
I feel like he's been out for so much longer than that.
Yeah, so that does matter, but you can still beat the Suns. You can still beat the Grizzlies. You can still beat the Atlanta Hawks. And you might be able to beat the Clippers as well. So I'm going to... Injuries matter, obviously. And we mentioned there's 5 guys out right now. There hasn't been 5 guys out this whole time. We're just saying, at right now's case, maybe you start slowing down LeBron's minutes, and he talked about after the Clippers game as well that might be something that has to happen because the game's not going to matter as much. But I just think we can make excuses for this team, but this to me is inexcusable. This collapse and the fact that hey, we added LeBron. And we won one more game than last year at this point. Literally one more game. The Lakers are one game better with LeBron James, with this core. I have no idea what has to happen in the offseason. Obviously, you need to add a star and stuff like that, and that's gonna be a difference and stuff and all that. But man, this young core just is not gonna work out. That's what I've surmised is that Kuzma, Ingram, Hart, all of them are not going to work out. And Lonzo, he's been out, so it's hard to put blame on Lonzo, to be honest, because he's been out and they've had this collapse pretty much ever since he's been hurt. But the rest of these guys, man, I get Ingram was playing well, but still losing. Kyle Kuzma has not. He's played to his ability. He hasn't played above his ability. He didn't play above to what we thought he would this year. And Josh Hart is disappointed. Josh Hart didn't make a three-pointer for a month. For a month, Jared. He's a three-point shooter, and he didn't make Reggie Bullock, like the other night against the Clippers, missed every three he took. He's supposed to be a three-point shooter. This team just doesn't work, and they need to blow it up more than likely in this offseason.
You think so?
What else are you supposed to do? I mean, actually, there's a lot you need to do. You need to fire Luke Walton. You need to do a bunch of other stuff, and we'll talk about that. Luke Walton and who could be the new coach and stuff like that. Because Luke Walton absolutely needs to be fired. You can't fail like this and not get fired for it. You see too many coaches do. But I just you need to blow up this core at least. There's no way that I want to see Kuzma, Ingram, Hart, and Lonzo on the same team next year. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I don't care about the Lakers rebuilding anymore. I want them to be playoff contenders. I'm okay if you're not championship contenders because the Warriors are ridiculous, right? That's tough. Okay, you even play them in your division 4 times, but to not make the playoffs and for the Clippers who are in LA to make the playoffs over you and just to look playing better than you, for the Spurs who their teams have gotten worse and worse to make the playoffs over you, for the Sacramento Kings who Shaq was calling the Queens back in the day, for them to be making the playoffs to you, for Minnesota to be above you, they can't even function. It's unreal to me this has happened, and something drastic has to happen with the players. Now, do you agree with me on that? That those players can stay, or that those players need to go, or do you think they can stay and still work this out?
See, I still like those players. I'm not of the mindset that they need to blow this thing up. I think really what happens now is the pressure will only continue to rise for Magic Johnson and for Rob Pelinka. I think you still have good quality players in these young guys. I think the problem is the other veterans and the other bench guys, right? You obviously have LeBron James. That's a staple.
Of course.
I think for at least the meantime, until the trade deadline comes or until you can trade for Anthony Davis or another superstar, I think you keep Brandon Ingram. I think you keep Kyle Kuzma. I think you keep Josh Hart. Lonzo, listen, I want to say one quick thing on Lonzo. I like Lonzo as a player, and I do agree that with his absence, their defense, especially when guarding guards, has dropped dramatically. But Lonzo's been out for like over 2 months now. So you can't sit here and tell me, as a professional basketball organization, that in 2 months you can't come up with a different scheme to stop players. Like, Lonzo is not the best point guard defender ever, right? And when he's out, yes, that's going to hurt you for a little bit, but whether you have to put LeBron James on the point guard or, like, you have to be able to come up with different schemes. And the fact that the Lakers have not been able to, come up with a different type of way to stop players just because Lonzo Ball has been out, to me, is just ridiculous. It shows their lack of, I don't even know what the right word is, their lack of trying to be innovative and come up with
lack
different...
of intelligence.
Lack of intelligence, really. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me with that. But, I think everyone wants to just sit here and say, oh, well, they haven't had Lonzo, and Lonzo's their best defensive guard. Okay, that's great. Well, guess what? He's been out for 2 months now. So you have to come up with other ways to supplement that, and they haven't been able to do that. So from the Lonzo Ball standpoint, I'm really tired of using that as an excuse and tired of hearing, people and other reporters and commenters. I listen to ESPN LA every morning, ESPN LA radio, 710 every morning, and they constantly bring that up. Oh, well, Lonzo Ball's been out forever. Okay, well, guess what? Then come up with another way to win, dude. Like, come up with another way to win. You can't sit here and continue to use that as an excuse. So going back to potentially blowing this team up, I think they need to, number one, get another sharpshooter because they clearly do not have a three-point threat to go along with LeBron James. If you go back to throughout LeBron James' career, whether he was his early days in Cleveland, when he was with Miami, when he had Ray Allen, or his later days in Cleveland when he had Kyle Korver, he's always had that three-point shooting complement to go along with his skill set, a guy that he can rely on to dish the ball out and consistently make threes. And I think they need to get better veterans in there. Lance Stevenson is not the player that he used to be. He's basically just a showboat now. JaVale McGee, even though I like what he did at the beginning of the year, his recent play, I think he's kind of just checked out, and I don't think he's been good for this team lately. Tyson Chandler, to me, unfortunately, is kind of just washed up. I don't think he's that much of a good player. So Rajon Rondo has probably been the best player, but unfortunately for him, he's had multiple injuries as well. So I think this team needs to do a better job of bringing in veterans that can help complement what these young guys have done. And, I really, LeBron James, along with Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, their entire offseason needs to be dedicated to going out and finding another superstar to pair with LeBron. Whether it's Anthony Davis, whether it's Kyrie Irving, whether it's Kawhi Leonard, which I don't see happening, whether it's Klay Thompson, they have to find someone else that's a superstar. I'm not talking about a star. I'm not talking about another complimentary player. A guy that can come in and literally spell LeBron James. Because we saw it this year, and LeBron James is only going to get older, right? So it's not like he's going to add an extra spring to his step. If this is the LeBron James of what we can expect from now on, he needs help, right? And he obviously has needed help the last 4 or 5 years. So, if he gets injured again or if he has nights where he can't carry the team, you're going to need another Anthony Davis type player or another superstar to come in and help LeBron along with these young guys. So I think that's what their focus needs to be. Keep the young guys, add some other veterans, better veterans that can play, and add another superstar. I think actually blowing this team up and getting rid of those players that you mentioned, I don't necessarily think that's the right idea because I still think these young guys can play. It's just, at this point, they're tapped out mentally, and there's probably nothing they can do to salvage the rest of this year.
Well, no, there's no way they can salvage this year. I'm not even saying blow up I'm not saying trade everybody away. I'm just saying I don't want to see all these players back. I absolutely don't want to see all these players back. And, so what I'm saying is if they trade anybody for anybody, I don't care. You could trade Kuzma, you could trade Ingram, you could trade Lonzo for Anthony Davis, and I now will not care. I know I said stuff during the trade deadline that I said that you got to keep that after this happened. It proved to me that maybe there was a reason Magic was like offering everybody because he's like, these guys aren't that good. Pelicans, maybe they won't know. The Pelicans, they knew. So I don't know. The good thing with Lakers though is they do have $45 million in cap space next year. They get Rondo off the books. They get Caldwell Pope off the books. Muscala, Stevenson.
That's another one, by the way. Yeah. Muscala.
Did nothing.
Now, listen, that trade to me, it's like, okay, the Lakers aren't able to trade for a superstar And so what do they do before the trade line? They trade Zubac, who I think was a very good
Zubac's
up
doing
and
well with the
coming
Clippers.
center. He's doing well with the Clippers. He's not a guy that's going to sit here and get you like 20 and 10 every night. But as a guy coming off the bench and giving you spot starts, I think Zubac is a very formidable center/power forward, a guy that has some offensive moves and was continuing to develop. And the fact that the Lakers literally threw him to the wind and actually let him go to the Clippers for Muscala, who has literally done nothing since he's come over, to me, that one kind of blows my mind because I don't understand why you're giving up on talent like Zubac to get a player, you know, who can supposedly be a three-point shooter. Isn't that why you traded for Reggie Bullock? Yeah. Like why you already have a Reggie Bullock? Why are you trading for another potential
Why are
three-point
you trading
shooter?
a center?
Right, that can't shoot. So I just, some of the moves that this team has made, right, they haven't made the big moves, obviously, and then they make these little small moves that don't seem to be much, but in reality, like going into next year, I'd like to have Zubac on my team. As a bench guy coming off the bench, or like I said, spot starting, I want Zubac on my team. If I'm the Clippers, if I'm Doc Rivers, I'm saying, oh, thank you. Like, Zubac is great. I was watching that game a couple nights ago against the Clippers, and it was the Clippers broadcast, and they were raving about Zubac. And I'm sitting here saying, if you're the Lakers, like, what are you doing, guys? Yeah. Like, first of all, you can't get the superstars necessary to come in and help you this year, and yet you're trading away, what I think to be are valuable up-and-coming pieces that you could either keep and trade later on for a better value, or literally have on your team to help you win, and they're doing neither right now. So, this team is just not only the players on the court, but the front office and what this organization is doing, or what they're not doing, is just kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, Muscala with the Lakers, 10 minutes per game, averaging less than 4 points. Zubac with the Clippers, 19 minutes per game, averaging 8 points a game. So, and they haven't lost 30 games yet.
Yeah.
So it's just, that one didn't make sense. And I probably would have tore it apart more if I wasn't a Clipper fan.
Right.
Because I was like, wait, we just got Zubac for like nothing.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. Like, who cares? Right. I just don't understand that. Okay, then this transition's perfect. Who is to blame for this? Is it LeBron? Is it Luke Walton? Is it Magic Johnson? Is it the young core, or is it everybody?
I think it's a combination of everyone. Yeah. You have to start with the front office because these are the ones that have helped build this team. Now, Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka did not draft Lonzo Ball. They did not draft Brandon Ingram or Kyle Kuzma or some of those, right? So it's like they did bring in LeBron James, but they're not the ones that have put this entire team together. True. So you can't sit here and say it's completely their fault. But of the status of Magic Johnson with the, magic that he has, not to be, but you would think that they would be able to bring in another talent to pair with LeBron James. So from that standpoint, you have to give them at least 40 or 50, half of the blame for this. I think you really do. LeBron James deserves some of the blame, more so because of his lack of play. And if people want to sit here and say he's been hurt, then he shouldn't have come back. Then he should have waited until he was fully healthy, because I understand him wanting to be a leader, wanting to come back and help his team win when they still had the opportunity. But when you come back and you just flat out don't play defense, when your other teammates who are less talented than you are literally pushing you in a defensive position, that shows that you shouldn't be on the court, right? So I don't care if you want to call yourself the king. You're not the best player in the league right now. Right?
Absolutely not.
You can't consider yourself the GOAT right now. And really, you need LeBron James needs to be sitting on the bench because he doesn't deserve to be playing right now. So I give him probably like 30% of the blame, and then the rest of the blame goes on to me. Luke Walton gets some of it, and the young players. Luke Walton doesn't get all of it because I think he's just a puppet between LeBron James and Magic Johnson. I think Luke Walton is just out there to be the face as the head coach. And then I give the rest of it to the young players for not necessarily buying into this. And like I said, I understand injuries are part of it. But when these young players, when they look back 10 years when they're out of the league and they say, we played with LeBron James, and at least for this year, we didn't take advantage of that, I think they're going to look back on that and say, we screwed up, we messed up, we didn't try hard enough we should have played better. So, I know that was a lot right there, but basically I'm giving like half the blame to the front office, 30% of the blame to LeBron James, and then the other, the rest of the blame, the other 20% or so, goes to Luke Walton and the young players.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going 20, 20, 20, 20, 20.
Okay.
LeBron James, 20% your fault. Luke Walton, 20% your fault. Magic Johnson, Pelinka, 20% your fault. Young core, I've already given them 20%. You already heard it.
Man.
And then anybody else you can think of, Rich Paul, Byron Scott, Snoop Dogg. It doesn't matter.
Wow, you're going to the fans now.
The fans,
You're
fans.
equally distributing the blame.
This is everybody's fault because I don't know what the hell happened. All right, so this is everybody's fault. Everybody deserves equal treatment. Everyone would get equally punished in this situation. LeBron's GOAT debate is going to get punished in this situation. I think it's hard to compare him to Michael Jordan when he came and lead a team to the playoffs.
Oh, no, you can't.
Yeah, Luke Walton needs to get fired. Magic Johnson needs to be held accountable if he doesn't do something in this offseason. Like I've already indicted the young core. I think they've already screwed up enough. They should get traded away. And then, the other 20% is just it's kind of a joke. But this team just. It's super disappointing. Like I said, it's the most disappointing Lakers season I've ever watched. I mean, hell. And then we have this stupid stuff that they're going to sign Carmelo at the end of the season.
Oh, my God. Don't even.
We're not getting into it. I didn't write it down. I just remembered it off the top of my head. But, if Carmelo plays for the Lakers this season, I'm not watching. If they sign Carmelo Anthony, I'm not watching any of their games. Because that just shows they don't
They're
care.
not going to, because I think they understand that they're basically, eliminated from the playoffs.
Exactly.
But when the Lakers, still had a chance coming right out of the All-Star break, I guess there were talks of really bringing Carmelo Anthony in. And it's like...
Dumb.
So, you're willing to bring Carmelo Anthony in, who's been on, 3 teams in the last year and a half, proven... through his own play, not even through his mouth, but through his own play, if you go back and watch the film, Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, that he is just not worthy and not the caliber type player that this Lakers team needs, basically bringing him on because he's a good friend of LeBron James, and that's it, thinking that he can come in and be some three-point prolific shooter or, resurrect from his old days. That one doesn't make any sense at all. So the fact that they were even entertaining that idea is another reason that proves that this organization is just, they don't have their heads screwed on straight and just not sure what direction they're going. I mean, they could go left, they could go right. They're all over the place right now. So I didn't even think about that, and I had forgotten about that. I saw that a couple of days ago, and I washed that completely out of my brain. So thank you for bringing that back up. I'm glad we don't have enough time left in this show to dissect that, because I can't even. That's just...
Hey, you know what's funny? So we joke about this stuff, obviously, and we're doing the funeral today. That's legitimate. I mean, the season's over. But, you remember when we were kind of... I don't even think we talked about this on the podcast, but we were talking about during one of the breaks how, LeVar Ball's saying all this stuff about everybody. LeVar Ball was kind of right. You know what I'm saying? LeVar Ball was right about the Lakers team in long run. Now, he might be blustering because his son, hasn't turned into the superstar, it's whatever, and he was in trade talks, and he might just be going out there trying to save the situation. But, LeVar Ball was even right about this team. He predicted that Magic would kind of screw this up, and LeBron, and they did. They didn't make the playoffs, and his son has every advantage in the world because they're 5-14 without his son. So... This is what we've come to now, that LeVar Ball is now correct and makes more sense in the Lakers analysis than Magic Johnson and LeBron.
Hell is this world
what is going on, right? So, this is... So, unfortunately, the Lakers have died this season. They will be revived back to life for the 2019-2020 season, hopefully with a superstar or whatever. But this is the last time we're talking about this Lakers team. Maybe unless they sign Carmelo out of nowhere this season, which would be just maybe a Do You Care segment or whatever. But as far as we're talking about, no more Lakers talk. The Lakers have died, and it was piss poor this season. The way they played. So unfortunately, we are done with the Lakers this season.
Bye-bye.
There you go. You hear the music right there. If you're listening on OC Rock Radio and YouTube, if you're listening on Facebook Live, you're like, what music? It's a gimmick, all right? You got to deal with it. But, Jared, solid podcast today. Unfortunately, we had to bury the Lakers. But Bryce Harper, the NFL is really going to get exciting next week.
Right.
So I cannot wait to see what the free agents get signed, where Antonio Brown goes, because they'll more likely get traded. And, of course, spring training will be moved on. And there will be, of course, some more NBA talk. So next week's podcast will be just as good as this one. So tune in next week. As far as this week, I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast.